Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Um, as we talked about yesterday, the Biden speech from last night was um, disturbing at best, extremely troublesome. I'm going to give you some comments about it that I wrote in real time yesterday when the speech, right after the speech finished. This morning, when I talked to the media about this speech, I had a lot of people who were busily asking me in the media about what I thought about Kevin McCarthy's speech, and the answer is I didn't see it because I was busy writing this piece on the war on dissent. And you can get this piece that I've already linked it in the comments in the chat. So if you look at the chat at the top, you can click right over to the speech, over to what I wrote. Joe, what we saw is Joe Biden went to the holiest secular setting in America, Independence Hall, a place where the Declaration of Independence was penned by Thomas Jefferson, where James Madison struggled over how to create separation of powers to prevent the tyranny of the majority, which was the history from Athens, that they were trying to incorporate representative government, consent of the governed, while avoiding the tyranny of the majority and respecting minority rights. So that's where they chose to stage this. That's where Joe Biden's people chose to stage this. He did so in terms, he talked about this in terms that serve as full, this is Biden again, in terms that serve as a full speed ahead order for his weaponized Department of Justice to crush all dissent by those who disagree with his far-left policies and to seek to defeat them in the 2022 elections. Biden had the audacity to claim opposition to political violence when it was his supporters. And this is really personal. I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to talk to you about it. It was his supporters who surrounded the White House when Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination in August of 2020. I was there. I was in that crowd of people who were fortunate enough to be on the White House grounds in this unprecedented time when we got to actually see a president of the United States accept the nomination of the party from the portico of the White House. It was an amazing patriotic experience, but the White House was surrounded after dark by angry leftists chanting to that and trying to overwhelm the crowd and threatening people who were on the inside. Angry chants. We knew what was happening outside because we'd watched the news and we'd seen that the area outside the White House descend into anarchy night after night. And now we were on the inside looking out. The question always was, well, how are we going to get out of here? And it was in the back of everybody's minds. And so we started heading out. And guess what? There was no plan. We were going out the few exits that were available. And there was really no plan to get people out of there through the chaos because the Secret Service's job was inside the wire and there wasn't Metropolitan Police on the outside engaging in crowd control. At least there were very few. And so some people wandered around for hours. They got out and they went to a different exit. And they went around and literally wandered D.C. because they were told, don't go by the White House. And we all parked by the White House. In fact, I was parked at the Willard Hotel, which is about a block away. So, but in my case, some friends said, you can't walk out there, Rick, get on this bus. And I got on a bus and I rode around. And it took about 20 minutes of riding around. It took us to the Trump Hotel. And it wasn't until 3 a.m. that the Metropolitan Police said it was okay to walk to my car. And even then they sent armed escorts to make sure it was okay for a group of us to walk to our car. That's violence. That's political violence. Rand Paul was assaulted. Senator Rand Paul and his wife were assaulted in this political violence. So that was political violence. Joe Biden never peeped, never said a word. When we saw Trump supporters in 2015, 2016, getting assaulted at rallies out when they were trying to leave, having stuff thrown at them, being assaulted for trying to leave a Trump rally. in places like Irvine, California, which is in Orange County, which used to be a conservative stronghold. When we saw those things happening, the Biden people never said anything. In fact, they encouraged it. When we saw that Donald Trump try to get to speak to the California Republican Party in San Jose in 2020, he couldn't go through the front door. He couldn't go through the front door. Because the San Jose police said, we can't protect you. And what's more, the mayor of San Jose said, we won't protect you. And so Donald Trump had to walk through a dirt field in his suit with his dress shoes, walk through a dirt field, over a berm, climb over a berm, and to get to the back door for the San Jose Convention Center in order for him to make a speech to the California Republican Party. Joe Biden, was he concerned about political violence? Not on your life. He wasn't concerned about political violence. They cheered it on. They egged it on. It was legitimate dissent, if I remember correctly. So we then saw Antifa and BLM. By the way, BLM were an undercurrent in Washington, D.C. through the last months of the Trump presidency. And after dark, you couldn't be in D.C. The businesses were all boarded up. You had graffiti on plywood everywhere. It was dangerous. It was dangerous. How did the mayor of D.C. act? What did she do after the assaults on the White House? After 3 times the White House was breached, 3 times the White House was breached, and President Trump had to be evacuated to a safe place in the building, in the complex, 3 times. How did they react? They said they created Black Lives Matter Plaza. So the protesters, so the anarchists, so the people who are rioting had a safe space. It's unbelievable what we've seen. We saw Portland, Oregon, federal building in Portland, Oregon, constantly under assault by Antifa. We saw Seattle having no-go zones created because crazy people burned down a police station and then took control of a neighborhood, destroying the neighborhood. Those people paid taxes, but no police were coming because the city of Seattle turned their city over to the Antifa mob. Not a word of dissent from Joe Biden. His vice president, Kamala Harris, her staff was busy donating to bail out people who engaged in political violence. We saw Joe Biden's Department of Justice, his AG, Merrick Garland, a former federal judge, refused to provide protection for Supreme Court justices in the run-up to the decision that effectively that overturned Roe v. Wade. Wouldn't provide protection services for Supreme Court justices as mobs tried to intimidate people in their homes. We saw somebody captured who was going to kidnap and kill Justice Kavanaugh, travel from California to do it. No outrage, no additional security. Nope. Political violence. No political violence here. These people, Joe Biden, created a dog whistle to the left to say that that's okay. Now, let me be clear. Americans for Limited Government, we did on January 6th, in real time, while people were entering the Capitol building, we issued a statement that condemned the violence, urged people to not go in the Capitol. We issued that statement in real time. So this is not saying, gee, violence on one hand good, violence on the other hand bad. No, we're honest and consistent. We can talk to Joe Biden right now and say, you are a hypocrite, sir. You have no moral authority to talk about this because you have supported, you have been silent, you have been complicit in political violence and for years. from when Trump was running for office, when the Obama administration didn't have a word to say about political violence against Trump supporters, from the Trump inauguration, when I was there and they had to put buses and trucks and blockade the area so Trump supporters could actually go to the inaugural balls because of protesters and violent thugs on the streets who were intent on causing harm to us. So, folks, Joe Biden didn't say anything. So don't lecture us about political violence. Take care of the violence on your own side of the aisle. We'll take care of that violence on ours, buddy. And with that, I'm gonna go and look at a few comments. We are living Atlas Shrugged. John, you are correct. If anybody hasn't read Atlas Shrugged, it's a good read. I will say that there's a 75-page speech about 3/4 of the way through that you have to be a stalwart to get through. But you look at the circumstances and the collapsing of a lot of the things that we think we know about. That's in Atlas Shrugged. It's basically people saying, I'm not going to care anymore. There is no Galt's Gulch, people. That's the problem for you Atlas Shrugged fans. There is no Galt's Gulch. America is Galt's Gulch. So with America being Galt's Gulch, we better not lose it. Let's talk. So one man, it took the whole party years to do what is happening. The Democrats have been working on this. JFK and all the Democrats did this. The Democrats have certainly, I'm going to say, Pauline, the Democrats are certainly responsible for this to a large extent. The one thing that I find refreshing is you look at people like Barry Weiss, who is very liberal, was former editor of the New York Times, who got fired because she let Tom Cotton have an opinion piece in the New York Times. And apparently you're not allowed to have an opinion piece if you're a U.S. senator and you don't agree with the leftist opinion. So Barry Weiss ended up being fired, and she's turned out to be a actual real voice elite reason on the left. And so there's a flip that's going on in terms of a lot of the intellectuals on the left who are seeing what has come about and are expressing shock that all this time they thought that the violence was going to come from the right, that oppression was going to come from the right, that free speech was going to be destroyed from the right. And they're astonished to discover that all along the threat was from the left. So there is some hope in that regard. Not to make too much of a cultural reference, but Johnny Rotten, who was an anarchist from the left, has recently been expressed that same shock that he's discovered that the actual threat to the speech, the actual threat to freedom, it was never from the right. It was from the left, and he's just waking up to that fact. Now, maybe Johnny Rotten's just waking up altogether. I don't know. Not to go too far into the Sex Pistols. Let's see what we got. Never thought I'd talk about Sex Pistols, did you? Let's see. They're stopping comments and likes. Hate the truth. Never, please. Yeah, Cindy, you got it right on the head. We have to. This is very clear. Joe Biden said one thing that was absolutely true. We're an inflection point in this nation's history. I'll use this exact term, an inflection point in this nation's history. And we're going to go one way or the other. And he's scared to death of one thing, and that's you going out to the polls, getting everybody who agrees with you to the polls, and working to make certain that A, we vote, B, we get everybody else to vote, and C, provide whatever help in terms of being a judge, election judge, or doing other things that your local campaigns need for vote to ensure voter integrity at your local polling place. Those are the things that we can do right now that's set up so we can win on November 8th. Remembering that election day in many places starts in the middle of September when the first ballots go out. So election integrity has to start before that. And so now's the time to reach out to local parties, local campaigns, and say, do you need any help? Because, if we're waiting until November 8th, 70% of the ballots have been cast. And at that point, as was said when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the die will have been cast. Let's see here. Yeah, that would be nice, but Kimberly, or Catherine, I'm sorry, that's not happening. That's not happening. We have to fight our way through tough times to be able to get and do as much as we can to stop what's going on and to keep as much of our country intact as we can, and not let this wrecking crew effectively, irreparably break the country. So a 4-year term, 8-year term, 12 years of people who disagree with them in the White House doesn't make any difference, because you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to break Humpty Dumpty, because they know that no matter what you do, you never get Humpty Dumpty back. Let's see here. I'm going the wrong way on these, but let's see here. Let's do, hold on. Trump is done with, period. Democrats and media coverage have set Trump up. They certainly are trying to, but you know what I've seen for a long, long time? And this is just true. This is Donald Trump. They are Ahab, and Donald Trump is the great white whale. Okay. They are chasing the great white whale nonstop. They have been for 5-6 years, and they haven't caught him yet. And every time they think they've got him trapped, they don't. And let's just understand with this. When Donald Trump had something he did yesterday, I believe it was, that was brilliant, because for all the time we've been talking about this, nothing got the message across and clear. What he did was, there was a picture that the FBI released of all these secret and confidential documents, which by releasing the picture, they violated the law, okay, if they were secret and confidential. And Donald Trump just posted that picture and said, good thing I declassified them. And that said everything you needed to know, that all those pictures, that was just for show. Every document there was declassified and was perfectly legitimate for him to hold, because he was president. He had the right to declassify said documents. So so all that show thing that the FBI did to coincide with Biden's big speech, that was all just there. That was a show, and Donald Trump took them apart. I'm going to show you guys something real quick, and I think it's an important. I think we're going to make an important point here, because when you look at this is obviously the beginning of the speech yesterday. I wanted to show you something that's really interesting. You've seen all the dark red images and stuff of Biden. Well, watch this. This is the beginning of that speech at Independence Hall. Watch the lighting. So you've got President Biden and Joe Biden walking up. Slowly. Hurry up. Come on. Don't put the podium so far away. I feel like this is a Mystery 3000 theater thing here with this going on. But keep going. Get there. Come on. Kiss her. And then send her on her way. Okay, so there's no lighting there at the podium. They turn the lights on at the podium. Okay? And they have a little problem adjusting, because they wave. Ho-ho. He goes over, he kisses her, he's busy, he licks his lips. Then he comes back. Now watch. Boom, they turn the lights off behind.
Americans. Have a seat.
Okay, now the reason that I wanted you to see that is because this ominous red background that we've seen the pictures from, this was a lighting mistake. They made a horrific mistake and in terms of this, and it's largely probably because the first time they tested it when it was dark out was right here. They didn't test it in advance, so they made a massive mistake. in terms of the lighting. And it shows you how lighting has such a big effect on things. So now we're going to go a little bit further.
I speak to you tonight from sacred ground in America.
I'm going to force you to watch it for about
Independence Hall,
20 seconds.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is where America made its Declaration of Independence to the world more than 2 centuries ago with an idea unique among nations, that in America, we're all created equal. This is where the United States Constitution was written and debated. This is where we set in motion the most extraordinary experiment of self-government the world has ever known. With 3 simple words: we the people, we the people. These 2 documents and the ideas they embody, equality and democracy, are the rock upon which this nation is built.
You know, here's the interesting thing. Let's just be clear. The Constitution, James Madison constructed the Constitution specifically to divide up power. Division of power was the purpose of the Constitution. It's why we have 3 branches of government. It's why we have a House of Representatives and a Senate. Oh, by the way, Madison didn't want to have a Senate. He had to do a compromise to have a Senate, and the Senate was devised to be representatives of the states, appointed by the states, not from the people electing senators. So the Constitution itself had the House of Representatives, which was direct election of House members every 2 years. Power of the purse was put in the House because the power of the purse is the real power over government. Remember that when you think about Kevin McCarthy being speaker in a few months. So that was the intent of these framers. It was not, and it was definitely not to have one person as president and all the meetings that work for them in the executive branch being the all-powerful authority to be able to make all the rules, make all the decisions, and intimidate those who didn't agree with them. In fact, Madison deliberately sought through the Constitution to protect minority rights and minority against majority rule. And that's why it's hard to pass stuff through Congress. And that's why a president who rules through executive order, who rules through intimidation through the Department of Justice or the IRS, a president who rules using those powers is antithetical to anything Madison wanted to have occur, anything antithetical to anything those framers wanted to occur. So understand, when he talks about this, he talks about we the people. He talks about democracy 77 times in this. I don't know how many times, but he ends it with the word democracy for some reason. But the point is, they are rewriting congressional intent. They're rewriting what the framers actually thought. And to have Joe Biden stand there and lift up the framers, the same people who his followers are tearing down the statues, his followers want to take Jefferson out of the University of Virginia, where Jefferson has, he founded it. His architecture, none of the buildings are his architecture, but the student body is now trying to petition, at least the student newspaper is trying to petition to have all references to Thomas Jefferson removed from university documents. That's his supporters. So don't come to me about Jefferson and talk to me about how, you want to revere them, because you do not. You've done everything you could. And by the way, that building behind you that's so poorly lit right now, your supporters would tear it down brick by brick. I'm just going to go and show you something else here real quick.
They're how we became the greatest nation on earth. They're why, for more than 2 centuries, America has been a beacon to the world. But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began to speak as plainly as I can.
Okay, I think you've seen enough of that part. I'm going to talk about it in a second, but I'm going to show you, I'll move ahead a little bit on this thing. Okay, there you go. Note what happens right here.
That was lit here at Independence Hall.
Okay, so you'll
Flame.
see, watch the
We
background.
lit our way through abolition, the Civil
Watch the
War,
background. It's going to
suffrage,
happen.
the Great Depression.
There you go.
We build an America that is more
They
prosperous,
turn the lights up.
free, and just.
So suddenly he has a, you can see
That
the
is the work of my
Marines.
presidency.
You can, they basically
mission
changed the lighting. That tells
I
you they made
believe
a
in
massive mistake.
my
They
whole
realized it.
soul.
They had to adjust it. For the rest of the speech,
first,
they're screwing around with these
We must
lights.
be honest with each other.
But that's so for people who think, that was in some way, shape, or form, some kind of subterfuge or something was going on. The fact is, that was a screw up by the Biden people in terms of their lighting. And as you can tell from my being all bleached out, we've struggled with lighting here all day long. But truth be told, we don't. We're going to spend a lot of money on lighting, and that's what they do for a living. So let's talk about democracy for a second. And I think we have to actually ask ourselves, we talk about democracy, what are we? Are we, when he says they're taking out democracy and equality, when they say democracy, they mean rule of the majority. Democracy is whatever Joe Biden says it is. It isn't what we think. It isn't a classical term. It is a defined term that's been ingrained in young people's heads as being inviolable. Democracy is the answer to everything, when in fact we know that democracy is not equivalent to freedom. Democracy is equivalent to the rule of the mob, where if there's three people, this is democracy in its essence. If there's three people and two of them vote to kill the third person, steal everything they have, and kill them, under democracy, that third person has no recourse. They die and all their stuff gets taken. That's democracy. Our Constitution gives that third person the capacity to say, wait a second, I have rights endowed by God that say, I'm going to stand up and say, no, you're not going to take my stuff. You're not going to kill me. I'm going to go to court. I'm going to fight you. And it gives you a process for fighting the mob. And last night, Joe Biden attacked that process. He attacked dissent as being extremism. Dissent is not extremism. Dissent is American. And for him to stand in front of Independence Hall, where the people, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, the people who, John Hancock, all those people, I guess John Hancock didn't sign the Declaration of Independence, but all those people who signed the Declaration of Independence, maybe he did. I think he did. All those people who signed the Declaration of Independence, 56 men. They were signing a document that called for revolution, that called for political violence. That's the document they were signing. You can't get around that. So you really can't do a speech condemning political violence as being anti-American, doing it in front of Independence Hall, which the only reason we really know about it is because the birth of our country was built around a document that was penned there and where people voted to accept, to engage in revolution, political violence against the established government. Apart from that irony, and the irony that he gets democracy all wrong, let's talk about equality. When the Democrats talk about equality, they talk about equality of outcomes. They don't talk about equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity is the right to succeed or fail based on your own capacity. Equality of opportunity is the ability to go to school, but be able to, pay your own debts, for instance, work your way through school rather than partying so you don't have as much debt. That's equality of opportunity. our country is built around the concept of equality of opportunity and the things that have happened throughout time in terms of women's votes, women's suffrage, the Civil War, freeing the slaves, the subsequent civil rights movement, allowing blacks to have access to the polling places and equality, having blacks to have access to opportunity, education, and the like. All those things are built on equality of opportunity, but they're not built on equality of outcome. Equality of outcome says, I don't care how hard you worked. I don't care if you sacrificed for 20 years to get what you have. It's not fair that somebody who didn't sacrifice doesn't have it. So consequently, we're taking it from you and giving it to them. That's equality of outcome. It says that if you go to school and you work real hard, and let's say you work really hard and you're freshmen in college. For any of you people who are in college or have college students, you want to talk about this too. Equality of opportunity is everybody can go to class and everybody can work hard and everybody has an opportunity to get an A. Equality of outcome is it doesn't matter how much effort you put in. All it matters is that everybody gets an A because we have to have the same outcome for everybody. When you tell a college student that somebody who never attended class but showed up on the day of the finals got the same A they did, because after all, we have to have equal outcomes, they don't agree with that. And that's the single best way to explain, at least I've found, to explain the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. And socialists, and Joe Biden fits that category, socialists believe in equality of outcome. And that is a guarantee descent into poverty and oppression. Because ultimately somebody has to enforce the equality of outcome because we're not equal. We don't have equal abilities. We don't have equal capacities. Our God-given capacities are different and are valued differently in society. And so if you're going to have equality of outcome, you have to have somebody to enforce equality of outcome. You have to have a big government to make certain that outcomes are equal. And that big government always has people who are running it who somehow live in nicer houses. And that is what he's talking about, equality. That's the equality he's talking about. And Summer, you're absolutely right. Ruled by a majority in a democracy, any individual, any group of individuals composing any minority have no protection of power of the majority. 100%. And James Madison was eminently aware of that. That's what the entire construction of our Constitution was about, was trying to balance powers, not just between federal government, but also between federal and state government. And then the Bill of Rights, which our Constitution would not have been ratified without. Our Bill of Rights throws in the extra component of saying, oh, and there are these rights that are individual liberties that no government shall usurp, that no government should usurp. Hence the war on the right to keep and bear arms, because it is a right that the left can't stand because it's hard to control an armed population. And Shelby, you're right. We're not a democracy. We're a republic with representatives. 100% correct. But understand the reason he used the word democracy so many times in that speech is because it is a word that has massive positive appeal amongst his base, because words don't have meaning to people who are uneducated. And he does that. He uses that manipulation. He used the word republic one time in the speech that I remember. But it was clear that he's playing on the word democracy as being and trying to tie it to the founders. And democracy is exactly what the founders feared most. So anyway, let's see what else we got here. big government's problem. We strayed too far from our Constitution. It's time we get back to enforcing the laws of this. Yeah, Matthew. Americans for limited government here. This is how we spend every single day fighting to try to get this done, and sometimes in really weird ways. But I will tell you what, the fight right now is manifestly clear. It is beyond anything I've ever thought I'd see in my lifetime. But it's a fight we'll win, and you know why? How I know we'll win it? Because Joe Biden had to bathe himself in the foundation of this country, the freedom foundation of this country, the liberty foundation of this country, and try to fool the American public. Because by trying to use symbols of freedom while trying to disassemble that very freedom. And the fact he had to go to the symbol of freedom and lie about things that were actually a symbol that his supporters reject, to try to convince people that MAGA is bad and Donald Trump is a threat is an assault on America. Well, folks, that tells you that when somebody has to go and use visuals that they reject themselves to try to manipulate people, the fact of the matter isn't going to work, because the people who are watching, his own supporters, are saying there, why are you standing in front of that, a place of European dominance that affected all everybody else, and have been taught to hate Independence Hall and everything it stands for, taught to hate the founding fathers. His supporters hate the founding fathers. They tear down statues. So, so I don't think it works. I don't think the imagery works for me. He would have been far better off to do his speech from Wounded Knee or something. Let's see. Red Wave has started. I hope so. I think one of the things, Jonathan, thank you for commenting. And people can read the comment on the screen. I think that what we have is a true challenge. It's an education challenge, and that's something we try to do. But we can't educate your kids. We can't educate your grandkids. We can't educate your great grandkids. You can. And it's up to you to take the opportunities to show them what democracy is and why. To give them real life examples. If you got little kids, let's say you get 3 little kids together, and say, okay, Johnny, you go off and you go off and I'm going to have you go pick up the house. You go do this, and and then you just basically have some work not hardly at all and some work hard, and then say, oh yeah, you all get the same thing. That's democracy. Now, I know Jesus has the parable of the workers, and I'm not going to get too spiritual here, but Jesus has parable of the workers. It's like that. And the difference in that parable is every single one of those workers was told they would get paid the same amount of money, meaning being able to go to heaven if they believed in Jesus as the way, the truth, and life. Okay. And they believed in God and believed the gospel, essentially, without getting too evangelical. So that was really addressing the question that a lot of Christians had and a lot of people had. Well, I've been with you all the time. Shouldn't I get a special seat? As opposed to, and why should that person? They just started getting in on this, and why should they be treated as equally with me? And in the kingdom of heaven, we are all equal in the kingdom of heaven. And you don't get to heaven. You don't have like, oh, you got to get in the back of the bus because you didn't discover Christ until you're 75 years old. Jesus explains that that's not the way it works to get into heaven. However, the key element is he tells each person, and to review the story, the parable, somebody gets hired in the morning. He says, I'll pay you $1, essentially $1 to work all day doing this field. And then somebody about midday he hires, and he says, I'll pay you $1 to go in and work this field for the rest of the day. They hire somebody there's actually 4 people hired, but I'll just do 3. They hire somebody who's only there for an hour before dusk, and he hires that person. I'll pay you $1 to go in and clean the field. And the first guy comes back when he sees everybody else got $1 and he got $1. He says, wait a second, I worked all day and I only got $1, and the person who worked an hour got $1. That's not fair. And Jesus said, did I not give you what I promised you, which was $1? And so the guy says, yes. Well, you were paid fairly. And in the parable, that dollar symbolizes going to heaven. Okay. So that's how that all works. But that concept of fairness without the initial promise of the dollar is a great way to teach people what democracy looks like and how it can be and how it causes pain. It can cause pain. I've gone too far with that. It's boring, and I can see that. Let's just look at. Well, I went from that to the crucifixion of Trump. Jerry, thank you for the comments. This is a. I'm going to just say that we're seeing something which I never thought we would see, and that is our government going after a president of the United States, a former president, and going after all of his supporters and doing so blatantly. And I'm going to and I encourage you to read the piece. And once again, at the top of the comments, the chat groups, the pieces. But one of the things I say in there is I think is true. Joe Biden provided a very loud dog whistle to every government agency that it's absolutely okay to go after Trump supporters in every way using the full power of the federal government. That is clear. And one of the things we have to do is we have to get Kevin McCarthy to understand that if he's given the speakership, he has to stop the federal government from following that dog whistle. He has to cut their throats through their budgets to make it so they can't. That includes eliminating the 87,000 new workers at the IRS. Those are things he can do with a budget. Those are things they should fight about now before they become entrenched. And those are things that's the fight for September over the budget in this country, is the fight over those 87,000 workers at the IRS. We have to cut that number. We have to stop them from doing that. And that's something that Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell can do, particularly Mitch McConnell can do. And if Kevin McCarthy wants to win elections, he needs to start talking about doing exactly that going into the November elections, because what you'll have in going into the November elections is a mission that then in January they cannot walk away from. They have to cut the IRS budget significantly so that we do not have 87,000 armed agents going after Joe Biden's political enemies. We have to do that. Joe Biden opened the door. Joe Biden has the 87,000 agents right now. They're being trained. They're being armed. They're being hired anyway, hired and trained, and they will be armed. And right now is the time to stop that before they're on the job, not after. That's what Kevin McCarthy needs to do. That's what he needs to promise. That's what the fight needs to be, at least one of them. Part definition of fascist characterized by a dictatorial leader, Patty Best, thank you. Centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition. Yeah. And oh, by the way, one of the things that always kills me is, and everybody on this call on this thing knows this, but Nazism is National Socialism, and and I'm sorry, but you don't get to throw around terms and say, gee, they don't have anything mean. They get to mean what I say they mean. And I'm just going to say, and I'm not going to equate Biden with the Nazi Party, but from a fascist perspective, we've just increased the size of government dramatically. We've just increased the police power of the government dramatically. And we've just mobilized that police power both against a former political leader who is a current political leader and who is a future political leader over completely, excuse the expression, trumped up charges. And so, yeah, it's a war on dissent. And so war on dissent is a fundamental war against democracy. It's un-American, and it has to be rejected. And it is fascist. So, Patty, thank you for that comment. I'm going to put Dorit Hackman, Biden idiot. I'm no longer going to give Joe Biden the benefit of saying he's an idiot. He may be a puppet, but I'm not going to say he's an idiot. I'm not going to say that he's incompetent. I'm not going to say that he's senile. He loses all of that protection Joe Biden is exactly who we saw in that speech. He is an angry old man seeking to destroy his enemies. That's who he is, and willing to do whatever he can. He is a bully. He's not very bright, like many bullies, but he's a bully. At his core, he's a bully. And he wants to use, and he's not going to go fight Corn Pop on his own, trust me. He wants to have 87,000 IRS agents fight Corn Pop. He wants to have the FBI fight Corn Pop. He wants to have all sorts of people fight Corn Pop for him. And, because this is a guy who is abusing. This is such, the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago was such an abuse of power. And what we're seeing out of this FBI is so abusive and so wrong and it's after that speech, no one should ever doubt that it isn't with full approval and blessing of the president of the United States. So no more he's an idiot. No more he's being led around by the nose. No more of that. He owns the words he spoke and the ramification of those words. And he owns the condemnation that those words should shower upon him from all right-thinking people. And I'm not going to give him this. He was just reading a teleprompter. Blame the teleprompter. Somebody hired the teleprompter reader. Somebody hired the person who hired the teleprompter reader. And eventually, the buck has to stop with the guy who sits behind who occasionally shows up in the Oval Office. So I'm going to, Avril Moon, thank you. This is political terrorism against American people. We all need to exercise our right as citizens. This is our country, not the Democratic Party. They are servants of the people. Yeah, you'll know. He kept saying "we the people," so I put a sign I have that's usually like up there. I put a sign that I have called "We the People." I put it there just to take the saying that that is the first three words of the Constitution, to remind people that it is we the people. It is we the people. It is we the people. It's just not the people. I believe there's more we the people who believe in freedom, who believe in the foundational principles of this country, and who will fight at the ballot box to preserve those constitutional principles. We are at an inflection point. The 2022 election is everything. We have to win it. And Joe Biden recognizes that. And that's why he gave the dark, angry speech last night, was to try to mobilize those who follow the darkness and the anger that he exhibited. Those of us who believe in freedom have to bring that beacon of freedom to America by not matching anger for anger, but by answering anger with education and, quite honestly, understanding. There's some people who are angry. They feel like they've been left behind. I get it. We have to remind them that the poor in this country did dramatically better under Donald Trump than they are under Joe Biden. The poor in this country saw their incomes, their real wages increase dramatically under Donald Trump. Wages increased in the bottom quintile, the bottom 20% of American earners increased 9%. The actual top 20%, I think it was under 1%. So while these guys want to talk about income inequality, Donald Trump, through his policies, through his trade policies, through his economic policies, through a robust economy, which caused competition for low-skilled laborers, through his economy and his vision, made it so those at the bottom made dramatically more money than they were making before, and those at the top were relatively were running in place when it came to next to inflation. And that's so if you want to talk about who's better for the people who are left behind, it was Donald Trump. Because when it comes to wages, it isn't just how much money you make, it's how much money you get to keep. It's how much money gets destroyed by inflation. And so if you are living on a fixed income, if you're living at the bottom of the income scale and you've got 9% inflation, you don't have room in your budget for the value of your dollar to go down 10 cents on a dollar in a year. You don't have that room. Yet that's exactly what the Biden inflation policy brought on. And that's why people at the bottom did dramatically better under Donald Trump than they have under Joe Biden. He can't get away from that fact. It is unalterably true. Folks, I've kind of talked about this for a while, but let me see if we have anything else that we want to do. Summer, again, thank you. What Biden doesn't understand is we have a constitutional right to revolt. I wanted to avoid going down this path, but this is directly from the Declaration of Independence, written there in Independence Hall. So I'm going to read this out loud so y'all can get it. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces and is a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right. This is the people. It's the people. It is their right. It is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Consent to the governed. If a government failed, then the government citizens would no longer agree to be governed, and they would have the right to revolt. This was remember, the Declaration of Independence was a revolutionary document. It was the justification to the world for the revolution itself. This wasn't something like a Pol Pot revolution in Cambodia, where the revolution was because Pol Pot wanted power and wanted to kill the people who were in charge and would kill everybody left behind who didn't support him. This wasn't that. This was an intellect. This was a revolution of ideas, of ideals, about individual liberty, about the relationship between government and the governed, and the consent of the governed being the driver for the legitimacy of government itself. That by necessity requires dissent. It by necessity requires the ability to say, no, I don't agree. I have the ability to petition my government, First Amendment. I have that ability to fight back. I have that ability at the ballot box to change my government and not be subjected to a government that has absolutely no control and no reins. And yet today, because of the administrative state, the power of the fourth branch of government, they used to say the press was the fourth branch of government. No, the press is by and large is nothing more than the Democratic Party. The press, but the fourth branch of government is the administrative state, because with civil service laws, the president can't fire them. Hence, they're independent of the president. And while they're supposed to do the will and to implement the laws that Congress passes and the president is tasked with enforcing, the fact is the administrative state decides what they want to enforce and what they don't want to enforce. The administrative state decides which presidents they want to follow and which presidents they don't want to follow. The administrative state leaks out anything they don't agree with against the president and attacks a president's right to lead. Now, it's interesting that the same Washington Post that in January 20th, 2017, when Donald Trump took office, below the fold, but on the front page, had a big article that said, the resistance begins, and urges people who are in the federal government, administrative state, civil servants, protected, can't be fired, to leak information to the Washington Post so they can stop Donald Trump, who they called illegitimate as president. Okay. That front page of Washington Post. Those same people now are sitting there in Merrick Garland world in the AG's office, Department of Justice. He's just issued an order earlier this week that said, you can't talk to, if you're an employee in the FBI, you cannot talk to members of Congress without our consent. Now, that's because there were 14 whistleblowers who had come forward to date. And now there are reportedly more than 20 whistleblowers who have come forward to lay out what they're actually doing at the FBI around the Mar-a-Lago investigation, around a lot of the investigations and things they're doing. and basically tearing the scab off and letting Republican members know what's going on. Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa has been standing up and fighting this for a long time. Many of those whistleblowers are going to Chuck Grassley. He's had a very strong statement attacking Merrick Garland for this. Jim Jordan, who will be the House Judiciary Committee chairman if Kevin McCarthy becomes speaker, he has been vehement in terms of telling those FBI employees, those DOJ employees, that you are constitutionally protected in terms of whistleblowing. So the same people who encourage whistleblowing against Trump are now trying to stifle it and stop it against Biden and Merrick Garland. Bottom line, though, is there has to be a balance of power between the administrative state has to work for the president of the United States. That's all their power is derived from the president of the United States. The reason we know the administrative state, that the DOJ thinks that there's a separate branch of government called the Department of Justice, and whether it's the Department of Labor or it's Treasury with IRS, they think they're all separate departments of the government, parts of the government, not subject to presidential edict, is because look at how they behaved under Trump, where they believed that they didn't have to do what the president said. In fact, they believed they could undercut the president. They thought it was a sacred duty to stop the president's policies. That's not their job. It's not their job. And we have to have a capacity to fire people out of the civil service. And we have to have, if we don't have a capacity to fire people out of the civil service, then quite honestly, the only branch of government that matters is the administrative state, because our elections are a farce and a fraud, because they can't actually force the government to do anything. And the civil servants are the ones who actually run our country as nameless, faceless despots, each an Anthony Fauci wannabe, wanting to be king of the world, king of their world anyway. And we've seen how that works. I'm going to, before we go too far here, I'm going to just remind people once again, please sign up, tell people about both our Facebook page to follow, but also go to getliberty.org or go to dailytorch.com. Go to dailytorch.com. I'll put the little banner up here. There's getliberty.org. If you can go to getliberty.org, just subscribe to our newsletter. We've got a pretty aggressive Facebook following. We've grown our Facebook presence tremendously. We're up to about 230,000 people following us on Facebook now. But I don't know when Mark Zuckerberg's going to pull the plug on that. You don't either. What I do know is this: if you sign up at getliberty.org, I will be able to put something in your inbox every single day. This high quality information. It doesn't cost you anything. And we do ask for donations on occasion. We do give you opportunity to take action on issues that matter. We give you statements on things that are happening in real time. We attempt to keep you informed. And we're a small, hand-to-mouth operation. We're not gigantic. We don't have 2,000 employees or 100 employees. We've got under 10 employees. But the fact of the matter is, every day we spend fighting on this. I spend an inordinate amount of time on media, being in media, talking about freedom. I spend a lot of time talking to Congress. I spend a lot of time working with Congress to come up with solutions to problems. We have congressional offices call us all the time saying, hey, we've got a problem. What do you think? How should we deal with it? You've been writing on this. What should we do? We've been fighting the regulatory state and winning on a number of instances. And you can find out about those. Go to Get Liberty. We've got a number of things on there about it. Bottom line is, we fight every day for freedom. We need you on board. We can't fight alone. If we fight alone, we lose. It's when I'm able to send out an alert and have thousands of people respond that it matters. That helps a lot. And that's where you guys come in. And quite honestly, if you are an integral part of this fight, and we truly are blessed to have you be on this broadcast. Take what you take from it, spread it to friends, and participate on the Facebook page. follow the Facebook page. And that way, and you can participate on the Americans for Limited Government Facebook page, Facebook group. It's a lively discussion. It's good, and you learn a lot. And it's people like you are driving the discussion. We don't drive the discussion. We put our materials up there, occasionally comment, but by and large, it's people like you who are driving the discussion, and I think it helps. So with that, I appreciate y'all. Just keep your chin up. Remember this. We have a sovereign God. He is in control. If God chooses not to bless America because we have not followed him, that is his business. That is, he is God. We are not. Our job is to be the people we were created to be, and to be free. And my job, and hopefully yours, is to fight for freedom, whether it be individual liberty, religious liberty, whether it be right to keep and bear arms. Our job is to fight for freedom so that God's people, and so people can prosper. God does not promise us easy times. God promises tough times. At least as a Christian, he promises tough times. But we cannot back away from what our mission is. We cannot back away from what we are called to do. We would be denying everything if we were to walk away from what we are called to do, and I will not do so. I do not care what any president says. I do not care if he calls me extremist for fighting for the right to keep and bear arms. I don't care if he calls me extremist for fighting for fair and honest elections. I do not care if he calls me extremist for calling him to account for abuses of the administrative state. I do not care if he calls me an extremist because I stand for liberty and for individual freedom. And maybe that is extreme in today's world. Maybe it's extreme for somebody to stand up and say no. Maybe that is extreme. Maybe that's something which they want to get rid of. But that is not extreme. That's called being an American. And I will, and I hope you will also, resolve to be an American and stand for liberty, fly your flag, and not back down from those who would seek to intimidate you from exercising your rights and expressing your opinions as protected under the First Amendment. Remember, the government works for you. You do not work for them. And we have to take back this government to make certain we elect people who understand that basic principle. And with that, folks, I'm going to wish you a great Labor Day and enjoy the 3 days off. And I hope you have a blessed time with your family and friends. Take care and God bless.